You being
All that didn't record.
Ah,
that wasn't recorded.
No, none of it. I'm an idiot.
oh, well, we had a good first run at it.
All right, take two.
All right, I
That was
suck.
funny. So we started playing just the local circuit of just the handful of spots that kind of dug the country music scene in that area, and we kind of just had our little honey holes of spots we play. But really the turn was, I had a couple incidents, a few main ones that kind of end up impacting me a lot on the law enforcement side, to where that ended up changing my course as far as, okay, I'm probably not going to be doing a full 30 years anymore. There's a good chance that this is going to be wrapping up. And so if that was the case, it was like, well, this is the only thing I've known how to do. If I'm not going to be a cop anymore, like, what does that look like? And so I had this internal struggle of like, what can I do to help provide still? And, just take care of my family.
So you got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What keeps you motivated to stay proactive and get bad guys off the street?
The facts is a big cannon against a little tiny gun of opinions, because we've all heard people give us their opinions.
Let's talk about how easy it is to get narcotics in this country. Once they're in this country, anywhere within 2 days, the drugs will be in our cities.
Because we know knowledge is power.
Appreciate Mike Lisenby being here.
Nailed it.
for joining us on Behind the Barrel podcast. I'm going to read his short bio that he sent me about 7 minutes before he got here. It says, sorry, I forgot about a short bio. Born, raised in Washington State, 15 years as a police officer, retired, 11 years on SWAT, firearms instructor, post-retirement, and currently lives in Nashville as an independent country artist and part-time welder. So,
got to keep the lights on, baby.
So little do you know, or anyone else know, that we just had a conversation for about 26 minutes, and I'm a dumbass, and I never hit the record button. So
we're just making memories.
making
memories.
So we're going to try to do this all again. We probably have a little bit of idea where the conversation is going to go at this point, but it's still going to be new to you, and we'll keep it, all authentic and original. Podcast talks a lot about, or pretty much everything we talk about is anything outside of law enforcement. We'll cover a little bit of his law enforcement career, but we're going to start out and just let Mike talk for a while, or Michael. What do you prefer?
Michael's fine.
All right, Michael, for a little while, just talk about where you grew up, siblings, kids, all that up until about the high school years, and then we'll have some questions for you and kind of direct it at that point.
Heck yeah. Well, yeah. So thanks for having me. This is awesome. Just that it worked out. I mean, it's my first time up in Indiana. We were chatting the other day, and he was like, well, if you want to ever play up here, come on up. And so I was like, all right. And so he's like, actually, what do you do next week? And so we worked it out and getting to jump on here. It's awesome. I'm super excited. But yeah, I'm born and raised, born in Seattle, Washington. Spent most of my raising, at least up until college, in that Seattle metro area. Have 2 older brothers, older sister, and then 2 younger sisters. And then a very, first responder, blue, police type family with, starting with my father. He was a cop for 25 years. And then my older brothers were all on the medic side of things. And then myself and all my brother-in-laws are all, cops or in law enforcement. So none of my sisters got in law enforcement, but they all married cops. So it ended up becoming a theme and a very, convenient thing around holidays, because we all understood that we had to work around shift work schedules, and just a little bit of semper gumby of just being flexible with trying to make it work, but everyone understood. And so it made it nice and unique. But yeah, born and raised out there, and then moved out here to Nashville about 2 years ago.
Was that always an aspiration, or was it the Nashville thing, or was that just something based on circumstances and you wanted to live out a second dream, I guess?
Now, very much just circumstance, with, a lot to do with, how my, career ended up wrapping up, and just, it ended up being from just my history and stuff and experience with music. It ended up being a natural, just avenue to pursue, and we can get into that. My initial plan was just to do, 30 plus years in law enforcement and then retire and live all my days out and, from where I grew up.
Growing up, were you competitive? Did you play sports? Were you, I don't know,
Yeah, very much into sports growing up. I mean, from like when I was, from my kid, it was mostly football. And then as I got into junior high and high school, started branching out and did football and became, the three sports, did football, wrestling, and track, and then progressed through that and ended up playing 4 years of football up at a D2 school up in North Washington, Western Washington University. Go Vikes. So yeah, just so football and athletics and just sports in general were a big part of my growing up as well.
Yeah. So what like position and stuff did you play when you were playing football?
So mostly I spent most of my time on the defense side of the ball. Mostly I did a lot of stand up D end and then a little bit outside linebacker, and then I did a short little stint on the fullback side. And a lot of it was just we were prone to injury for whatever reason those seasons, and so we kind of had to, a lot of changing numbers and positions and stuff just as needed.
You had to love going in the backfield and getting a ball, right?
Well, that was the problem. It's like mostly how we ran things when we did run, it was more of just a lead block position.
Of course.
So it was rare that I ever got the ball. It was just more, hey, you're basically just a lineman that gets a running start.
As a lineman myself, I was like, man, I wish I could carry that ball sometime.
If we were more of a run-heavy team, that would have been more appealing, but we weren't. We were more of a throwing team anyway, so it was mostly just you were just an extra blocker for the most part. And so I prefer the defense side of the ball for sure.
Yeah.
Given our setups.
Especially where you get stand up and put your hand down both and get to play that like in between there.
Yep.
That's always fun. I love watching like the players that play that both, like when Khalil Mack was here in Chicago and he'd be down in 3-point and then standing up, and it's just like you had that option. Just loved it.
You almost have that feeling like you're in the blocks, like ready to take off for a race, but it's just it's cool. Get all loaded up and just get ready to take off. As long as you don't jump the snap.
Right. Don't be offside.
Yeah.
That's good. Nice.
As are you the baby of the family then, or are you?
No, I'm the top half, I guess.
I gotcha.
So, I guess I'm probably dead in the middle actually. So
Older siblings play in sports, or was that unique to you?
no, my older brothers, they played more soccer.
Okay.
And they were competitive in that regard. And then one of my younger sisters, she was very competitive in soccer. Like, she making like All-State and stuff like that. And, and then, so 2 sisters didn't really do much athletic wise. And then 2, the others were all on more of the soccer side of the game. So I was only really multi-sport kind of thing. But really my main thing was football. I was decent at wrestling, and I won our districts and I made state, but it was really more just to keep in shape and busy for football. So it's like, so it just, otherwise you start opening yourself up to just getting lazy or just, not being as prepared as going forward. So yeah, that's really all. And then track, I was a thrower, so I just did shot put and javelin. So it's just, again, it's just to stay busy and stay athletic and kind of keep moving forward.
Were you always this size, or were you bigger when you were in college playing ball?
I was probably I was still about this size. Because I'm not a tall guy. As far as like, especially like, like D end or linebacker side, I'm 5'11". I would probably walk around at like 225 during ball, but that's still kind of about where I'm at right now.
Right.
Definitely not putting the numbers up as I used to, but as far as weights, but that's those a lot of those heavy cleans and squats, they don't feel the same the next morning now that I'm got some mileage on.
No,
knees and shoulders.
Yeah. It's almost like getting older. It has its downsides, but what do they say? It makes you wiser though, right?
Yeah. When I was playing college football, I got up to 320, and I was just same thing as you were just working out constantly and everything. And like now, even to go in and try to, I couldn't imagine doing cleans or anything,
right?
But even squatting anymore, it's like it hurts.
Right. And I miss it. Honestly, I miss a lot. Like I loved like Olympic lifting, and then, I got into CrossFit for a long time there. So I loved doing that kind of stuff and just, but yeah, I was always a fan of power cleans and stuff. And that was always the competition of just getting those numbers up. And but so I do miss some of that stuff. And now it's just, hey, I just want to keep to where I'm not hurting as much in the morning getting up.
More of like a maintaining basis now.
Yeah,
So trying to build
maintain, make sure
Truly.
don't get any worse.
Yeah.
What about, so have you always been in music, or is that something that you discovered later in life?
Well, all grown up, like I never thought music would have been any way that I would have been able to support my family, but I always grew up with music in my life as far as like, I was always, I always enjoyed singing even from a kid. And then that kind of, I don't know if just fairly unconscious or just, hey, God knew he had a long different plan for me down the road, but I always had different things like whether it was choir or like, worship at church and things like that, or just generically singing around the house. Like there was always some measure of a vocal experience, like whether, like you said, that I was involved in pretty much from as long as I can remember all the way through even a short stint doing, college choir. But so I always had something like that going, growing up.
So you grew up in the church singing?
Yep.
Right on. And then how did you get into country music and not so much like the alternative music, like with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and those out from the Northwest?
So no, I mean, I still enjoy that music. But I was always drawn to country music even from a young age, just because I think a lot of it was, I loved the lifestyle idea of just, I always wished, growing up, I always wished, I had a horse and property and would go hunting a bunch and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff I had to learn to do later in life because, you live in a metropolitan area. It's not as easily accessible. But I fell in love with the stories and the storytelling of country music. And just that became a big part of why I think that was a big influence for me. And I think a lot of even like my style of what I enjoyed eventually playing was very similar. So it just made sense, especially once we dabbled into like getting into like a cover band kind of thing. It just made sense to stick with what worked and what kind of was more in our wheelhouse of, cause I wasn't going to be able to pull off like more of like a grunge scene. Cause I just wasn't the style or sound that I had. And so I think it just made sense that, I can go sing a couple of these, popular country songs pretty halfway decent to where people still came out to see us. And so we just ran with that.
Nice. I feel like there's kind of like that blend anyways, like kind of where you have some country that kind of blends over into that alternative music that's kind of missing in the scene right now. Like, So like those genres are kind of similarly come over. I mean, some of that alternative music was really hard, but then some of it was soft and it kind of blends almost like kind of mirrors there.
Well, and you see a lot of these days, the big popular thing is different collabs with different styles or genres of artists to where they're kind of getting that mixed sound a little bit. So whether it's folks from R&B to country to, to rock, and they're just like, hey, let's just start merging these together and having kind of a cool vibe out of it. So it's cool to see because it's, at the end of the day, it's different people's art, and it's cool to see where it's developing versus just,
got to stick to your genre instead of like kind of mirroring it. It sounds good. I like it. I like some of that new stuff that they're coming out with. They're mixing it together. Flows well. Yeah,
I agree.
So how hard was it to make that jump, like that decision to go from living up in Seattle, playing, these cover songs, being in the band, and just being like, you know what, wife, kids, we're going to Nashville. What was that like?
Well, initially, like I said, there was really no plans to do music. That was initially the cover band thing was just an idea that one of my patrol partners had when we were roadside one day. He kind of pulled up and said, hey, I play drums, you sing, let's start a band. And I was like, get out of here. And he's like, I didn't take it seriously at all much. And then he's like, no, we should, let's do that. And so I ended up hitting up a buddy that, I kind of started coming around to the idea. Then I hit up another buddy that did worship, was in the worship band with me. He was a great guitar player, and shot him a text, said, hey man, we're thinking about doing this. You interested? And just, yep, like almost right away. So he was on fire. And so we started doing that, but that was really just scratch that itch of like, hey, we all like doing this. And I started out playing, got more introduced with a lot of my family from my wife's side, played music a lot. And so they had their garage transition to like a music room with drums and guitars and amps. And we just played for family and friends, but that kind of got my live music itch going. So we started playing just the local circuit of just the handful of spots that kind of dug the country music scene in that area. And we kind of just had our little honey holes of spots we play. But really the turn was, I had a couple incidents, a few main ones that kind of ended up impacting me a lot on the law enforcement side, to where that ended up changing my course as far as, okay, I'm probably not going to be doing a full 30 years anymore. There's a good chance that this is going to be wrapping up. And so if that was the case, it was like, well, this is the only thing I've known how to do since I was like I said in our first go around, was I literally finished college on a Friday and started the police department on a Monday. And so my entire professional career was wearing a badge. And now faced with this dilemma of, now my situation is, it's looking like I'm going to be getting out of law enforcement for some of those reasons. I've got a wife, 3 kids. It's like that Seattle area is crazy expensive at the time. It still is. But you know, if I'm not going to be a cop anymore, like, what does that look like? And so I had this internal struggle of like, what can I do to help provide still? And, you know, just take care of my family. And we'd come out to Nashville a few times, like my wife and I, like we came out and, cause I'd been starting to write songs and, we actually came out twice. One to actually come out to record a song that I put out a while ago. And then other one was to, actually perform at a pretty good, it's kind of just like a event out there. That's kind of a local staple for Nashville as far as for new performers called Whiskey Jam. And that was kind of a good, it's one of those things where if you can get on that lineup, like you take it. Cause it's like everyone that's in the scene now, it's like that was like that was kind of like that was like sometimes they're like a rite of passage almost, like this is like one of the first stages that they play on their come up. And so if you can play that stage, it's kind of like you know, when people say, oh, I played the Opry and things like that, it's like this is kind of that for people when you're still nobody in the game. So it was a big deal on the songwriter musician side. So we did that. It was a great experience. And then but now we're still faced with the dilemma of like, hey, if I'm getting out of law enforcement, what's our step now? And my wife was actually the first person that kind of said the inside voice out loud. She's like, well, what if we just really went forward for the music thing and we all moved to Nashville? And I had to make her repeat that statement because I didn't really believe it myself, because it's one thing for me to want to go, hey, you know, I'm going to get out of, I'm looking like I'm getting out of law enforcement, but now I want to go chase this music dream. What's like, I'm not like an 18, 20, 21-year-old kid with no attachments. I've got a wife and 3 little kids. You know, it's like, you know, and a mortgage and all this stuff that I got to deal with and I got to take care of. And it's like to then go now into probably one of the most least secure, you know, lines of work ever, to go live off tips and playing and hoping, you know, you write a song that's going to hopefully take off or do something, but there's zero guarantees. And the fact that was, you know, I don't know, I think the Lord was preparing her heart for a lot of that. And I think when her saying that, it was almost like once we both said that out loud, like this, as weird as it is, this kind of does make sense. I mean, it was truly a blessing with just like everything that, you know, it's just like, I was asking God, I was like, just, if this is what you want us to do, please make it clear. And, you know, we did a lot of praying, a lot of soul searching, and literally from that conversation, every door and situation that was related to staying on the job was closing clearly. And that's not to say like I had, you know, it had nothing with like people and things like that. Like I just had my own demons I was struggling how to deal with. But every door that was related to go scratch this music itch and just see where this trail goes was opening in just tenfold. I mean, it was almost just like, okay, this is almost weird how much this is all lining up. And we just said, hey, we did a lot of praying on it and just try to have some peace with, hey, we did some truly good, heartfelt thinking and processing. It makes sense. Let's try not to be emotional about it and just make decisions. And so we had friends that loved our place and they go, hey, we kind of know what you're thinking about doing. We had just sold our place. We're not ready. Their situation changed. So whenever you're ready, we'd love to buy your house. So we were able to sell our house and sell off everything. We packed up a trailer. I actually, a buddy of mine that I actually played ball with in college, he's still in the NFL now, but on his during the off season, he does real estate on the side. So shout out Matt Overton if you guys need real estate out there in the Nashville area.
Is he the long snapper? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, he was at the Colts, and I reached out to him for a canine fundraiser, and he signed a photograph. He sent it to me. Yeah.
Matt's one of my best friends.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
So
he was super cool to us.
So we played college ball together, and then he ended up getting on, and he's been in the league. He's still in the league now. But he ended up in Nashville because was with the Titans, and he's bounced around a few teams now since, but he's loved the Nashville area. So they just stayed, and whenever if he gets into another team, they just go and they'll get like a long-term Airbnb during the season, then go back to Nashville during the off season. But then on the off season, so what a small world. So shout out Matt. Shout out Matt.
That's cool, man.
Matt's awesome. But I hit him up and said, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. You're literally the only warm body I know out in Tennessee for the most part. And he does real estate. And I was like, dude, we're looking at doing this. What can you help me? He's like, dude, I got you. And so we did some searching, kind of just figuring. We knew we wanted to be, basically put a pin on Nashville, drew like an hour circle around it. Cause I knew I didn't want to be in like Nashville proper.
Right,
I wanted
yeah.
to be close enough to where it's like, I could go there for rights and meetings and stuff and gigs and stuff, but I wanted to still be outside somewhere, you know, live a small town life with my kids, hopefully have some property. And that's what worked out. Like I literally found a house like on like Zillow that checked some boxes. And I said, hey, Matt, can you go check this spot out? And he bombed out there. We did one FaceTime and he's like, yeah, it looks awesome. I'm like, feels right. Put an offer on it. And so we ended up buying a house. Like, so the first time I actually saw our place in person was, I mean, it's like a country song in itself. I had a 12-foot enclosed trailer packed to the gills with all of our stuff. What didn't fit didn't go. So I drove that out with our dog. And then a few days later, after I'd gotten there, and my wife and our 3 kids one-wayed from Seattle to Nashville, and that kind of kicked off our life there. And we just hit 2 years, July 4th.
It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Law enforcement, first responders, military veterans. We see things and put our body through stuff that no one else in society has to deal with. We are good at coping with it mentally, but it still takes a toll on our body. Hormone replacement therapy is a great way to keep your body functioning as it should. And I'm not talking about walking around looking like you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just the typical body that we need to function in society with mental health, mental clarity, performance in all aspects of life. I have several family members and friends that have turned to hormone replacement therapy in order to produce a better life for themselves and their family. We are thrilled to partner with HPTRT, veteran and first responder owned company that knows what we are looking for and what we need. They actually care about the first responders, they actually care about veterans, they know what we're going through, and they are willing to help us in any facet of life. Not only with the hormone replacement therapies, but also medical doctors that have partnered with major pharmacies across the country and willing to do any type of telehealth that you need. If you're feeling sick and you want to lay on your couch and do a teleconference, they will send medications to major pharmacies that they have partnered with. So if you need any type of medical assistance, from hormone replacement therapy all the way up until you just feel like shit and need some telehealth, HPTRT is the place to go. Use code RED, R-E-D,
to get 10%.
So obviously the wife's super supportive. Kids,
Yeah, well,
kids all on board too.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they had no choice.
Yeah, but I was like, they didn't.
But they're also they're young, like you know. So at the time they were 6, 4, and 1.
Oh, okay.
So they really didn't have a say in the matter. But you know, so now they're 8, 6, and 2, 3. But they love it. Obviously they miss people. They miss, you know, because we're, you know, our situation was back then or back in Washington was, you know, we were blessed to where both sets of our grandparents or their grandparents are both alive, and they all had throughout everyone moving around and stuff. It's like it all ended up, you know, getting to where we were all within like 5 square miles at that point. I mean, everyone lived around different places for a while. Like, you know, her folks lived in Arizona for a while, then Oregon, and then back in Washington. And then we all ended up just collapsing and still nearby. So it worked out great. So leaving that was obviously the hard end, but I think they love their situation now, and we've got a good groove of just the life we're in right now.
What about like family, their extended family, brothers, sisters, mom, dad? They all support it.
Everyone. Because I mean, they've all been, you know, pretty lockstep with. Now again, they were obviously sad when we left.
Yeah, I get that.
But they all understood and were supportive of the why, and that was huge.
How is it breaking into the Nashville music scene? Is it tough? Is it?
It's interesting. I mean, it's like I said, it's such an interesting business and industry, and I think it's there. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's hard to even say like you're breaking into it, because it's just there's 10,000 ways to play that game. It's really what you are trying to do, and like where, you know, how you want to get there, and how quickly you want to get there, and what are you willing to give up in order to get there, you know, depending on how quick it is. And it really depends on what you're trying. Like if you're trying to just be an artist, like I just want to go sing songs, I don't care if it's my songs or what it's about. I just want to go sing in front of people and play big shows. There's people that want it, and that's fine for them. There's people that want to go and do just no, I want to just write all my stuff. I don't want to be I'm not chasing stadiums or, you know, or things like that. I just want to, you know, that more the opposite. And there are people there that just move there just to be a songer. They have no aspiration to play at all. They're amazing with storytelling and like just orators and stuff like that, if they can really just take an idea and then can put it onto paper and you can really see it in your mind what they're trying to say. And it's an amazing skill set. So there's all kinds of walks of life. And I mean, they call it a 10-year town, not necessarily because it takes 10 years to like become like a good enough player. It's because it's so much networking and just relationships and friendships that are developed over that time to where you're now, you may be this new guy, but like you put your time in, you start playing, you meet people, you go to shows, and it's like you may make friends with this guy who all of a sudden next he's playing some decent shows, but he needs an opener and go, hey, I'm playing this show. You want to come play a 30-minute spot? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm down. And it's like, so you start on ramping these different stages where, of development where you're constantly kind of trying to move forward if that's what you're trying to do. But it's interesting. It's like, and I'm meeting great folks. I feel like we're writing good songs, and now it's just a matter of like, I played a lot of just your typical bar gigs and stuff like that. But a lot of those, I mean, even like, if you guys are coming out tonight, you'll see it's like, hey, there'll be a lot of, you play a lot of covers, because at the end of time, there's a separation of you're either playing gigs or shows. It's like, gigs are you're hired for your entertainment, right? Like you're there to make sure people have a good time. Shows are like people are coming to see you for what your songs, your style and stuff like that, to where it's a little different. So my goal is to start getting into that vein where less gigs, starting getting to more shows where you're playing more. It's now more about, hey, these are things that were important to me. These are what I want to put out. It's not because, hey, I can play a couple Stapleton songs pretty decent. It's like, people are coming to want to hear original music and my style and take away the value of what I'm trying to portray, especially with the stuff I write. A lot of my songs have a lot of grounding in things that most, first responders will understand. So that's where I have had to frame my stuff with, I'm not chasing things like radio or like deals or nothing silly, because the stuff I write, it's like, it's not that marketable for the big guys, like the big label stuff, because a lot of it's pretty niche, but for that niche, it can hold some weight. So it's a lot of that deal is just, that's where I've had to kind of frame myself with that.
I think you're being authentic though, when you're coming across with like, you're not singing about things that you can't relate to. Everything that you, after we talked, I had you on Spotify, and I just have in the gym, I'm listening to your songs like on repeat.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then like, it's something, it all seems very you as a person. It comes off authentic. I don't know, it comes off things that you've lived almost, like every song that I listen to. So I think that even though it might be niche or whatever, I think it's still something that niche might pick up, and someone might see like, well, this dude's super authentic. So like they just might like the beat and the words. They might not be able to relate to it, but they still enjoy it. And
for sure,
based on your authenticity.
For sure.
Did you meet your wife through music? And then you can go in.
No, I mean, I met my wife, just we went to the same church in the town that I was first a cop at, and just met. So I met my wife in church, and it's been amazing.
That's awesome. And
she's awesome. She's a rock star, and she also plays drums too. So it's fun. We can still jam and play. She's actually, she jumps up and plays with me every now and again. A lot of it's a balance of, cause now that this is my job, it's balancing. Like I'd love her to play more with me, like with music, but it's like, it kind of takes it away, because now if we have to hire a sitter and stuff, it's like I'm kind of now working for free essentially. Okay. So it's definitely a balance of that, because I've got to frame myself as this is work now. And it's like, this isn't the hobby or what we decide that I had a main gig that was paying the bills. This is what keeps the lights on now. So I have to have that framework that I have to take it. That's why, even like when you offered out like, hey, my buddy's got 2 nights up here. I was like, yeah, I'll drive 8 hours to come play. Like if it's because it makes sense numbers wise to where it's like, I can do this. It's gas money. It's like, but at the end of the day, it helps keep the lights on. And if you aren't willing to do that, it's like you might not be in the game that long. And I think that's really where the success comes in about breaking in. It's like, I think truly, if you can, especially on the independent side, it's really just a matter of, can you stay in the game long enough to get to that next level? And once you do that, it's like, you can make a living. I mean, we're not all going to be, like I said, selling out Nissan Stadium and something like that, but I can still keep my kids and wife happy and fed and the roof over our heads, and do the things I want in life, and
doing something that you love, making money.
Something I love, and hopefully write some stuff that's going to hopefully impact someone else in a good way.
I think you're on a good path, man. You're very talented.
Oh,
I got text last night.
I had to pay him to say that.
I got text to prove it from everyone that last night texted me how amazing he was. So. They said that he was too good for the bar that he was going to.
No, that was fun.
Probably.
Hey, shout out Enzyme. That's a
I
cool
can't
spot,
wait to
man.
see it tonight.
That was a cool spot.
It's a cool spot. It is. Yeah. It's definitely. It's
I can tell you some stories from the past 30 years or 20.
That's funny.
No, Kitty brought about you meeting your wife, and I know our first talk without a recording, we mentioned wife stuff before, but you seem very passionate when you speak about your wife. And to me, I credit what I've been able to do in my life because of my wife.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could give a little shout out to your wife and what she means to you and your career and the support that she's given you to pursue this dream of yours.
Yeah. Well, Jody, shout out. You're amazing. Love you so much. I'd almost want to expand that and say that it's not my career. It's that her being who she is allows us to live this life, and that music is just a factor in that. And that, I'm a better man because of who she is. And then we are better as people together. And I think the fact that we are so in tune and on the same page with, obviously we have disagreements and fights like everybody, but for when stuff's on the line and like when the things that matter, it's like, she's a ride or die and just, she gets it. And it's kind of like having a partner on the street that okay, I don't have to worry about you. It's like, I know when things are going down, it's like, I can count on you. And it's like, and she's been that. It's like, I had a real hard time in my season in life, where a part of my story was like, I ended up going away for a little while after a shooting of mine and had to go work on some of those demons. And she was running solo for a long time with a lot of little kids. And that was a hard season for both of us. And then, she is a huge part of my foundation, and that this doesn't work without her. We don't work without her, obviously. And, so yeah, I think we're meant to have that person in our life, and I think we're all the better for it. And I think it's just, I'm blessed and I say it all the time. It's like, I'm blessed more than I deserve. And yeah, and she's a huge part of that, of why I'm of that blessing.
Yeah, and I felt that when you were talking, and similar situation. My wife, when I went to law school, I never signed up for law school. I didn't want to, I talked about going. She ended up buying me a study guide and signed me up to take the LSAT. It just said, you're doing it, you need to go.
Yeah.
And she stood by and took care of the kids while I was in school for 5 years. I took care of everything, been supportive, and kind of that same feeling. It's like, I got nothing without her. Like,
right.
I wouldn't have been able to do it. So it's always been us together. And, I believe you talk about church and everything, and I'm a church going man, and, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior.
Amen.
And my wife and I, we do everything as a family together. And I kind of feel like that's sort of where you're coming from.
100%. Well, that's what it's about. I mean, I don't think we're meant to run this life solo. And I think, and I think that's, like you said, because you guys all got kids?
No kids.
No kids? You got kids?
I have 2.
Yeah. It's almost like how pre-kids and post-kids, it's like you can never imagine life go reverse without them. It's like that, it's almost like that once you find that your spouse. It's like, I couldn't imagine going back and like starting over without that person in my life, because it's like I've already experienced what that level of joy and happiness is. And that right person, I think, just is what makes it worth it. And
Kenny will tell you he has no kids, but I think everybody that is involved in Kenny's life, their kids call him Uncle Kenny. Like, he's absolutely the around kids.
I'm the favorite.
He's favorite.
Absolutely. I can get that. I can get that.
My niece and nephew, I think they like him a lot more.
I don't know.
My nephews and my niece.
But hey, and you guys all talked about your wife, so I have to throw my wife out there.
Yeah,
we
gotta keep you in the doghouse.
Yeah, I think that in law enforcement, you need a sibling that's going to understand that and be there for you. And my wife's always been there, and I think that's huge. It's hard to do a law enforcement or even military career and not have someone that is a very strong mind at home that can keep you grounded, and when you're going through tough times, that they're always there to be your rock.
Yep.
So, all right. No, I had to get my wife from there. If I didn't mention my wife, I was definitely getting punched in the stomach later.
So what did you have a plan when you going to Nashville, or was it just like winging it? We're packing up and we're going, or did you know what you were even getting into when you left?
So not, I mean, I had an idea of just like, cause you know, I did a lot of my due diligence of like, hey, I need to start immersing myself in this culture of like, and like of the songwriter thing and things like that. And just, and having a good, reasonable expectation of what, you know, I'm not just going to jump out of the car there, all of a sudden walk in, like some record exec is going to be sitting at the bar, like some movie, like, oh man, your song's great. Come here. Now you're signing. It's like, I had no, you know, thoughts of grandeur like that is if that was a reality, but I also had I had a good grasp of just, hey, I'm starting over. I understand. Like, it's like when you start out the PD, it's like, if you go in there knowing you're the new guy, you've got to earn your stripes. You've got to put your work in. You got to put your time in to cause you don't know, you know, I don't know if you can swear on this probably.
Yeah, you're fine.
You don't know shit for shit when you start, right? It's like, so you have to look and immerse and just be humble and be respectful and just, hey, put yourself out there, make mistakes, try things, you know, just do what you can as much as you can to try to just learn as much as you can, especially in, you know, short periods of time. Find people that are ahead of you in that game and like, you know, try to get wisdom from them. But like from jump, like I started jumping in the deep end of just trying to play wherever I could. You know, luckily I had some experience, you know, with the cover band thing. Like, so I was comfortable playing live. And I had at least a decent amount of songs that I could just start playing right away. I wasn't kind of like, hey, let's move to Nashville and now I'm going to start figuring out how to be a songwriter or player. It's like, that's, right. I would have been a little bit behind the ball. So I mean, once we kind of knew what area we were moving to, I jumped right to like things like Facebook. I was like, hey, you pull up like little, like, you know, community groups and stuff like that for your area. And I was like, hey, I'm Michael Lisenby. I'm a singer songwriter. I'm moving to town. Who do I need to talk to? What are places that play music? And ... please just, and then tag whoever. And so next thing you know, it's like they're all tagging these handful of folks like, oh, talk to this guy, this guy, this guy. One common one, Zach Brooks, shout out. He's got a guitar shop in town where I live and is kind of in that, you know, local music scene. Shot him kind of back to our topic of like, hey, being comfortable just talking to people, like, you know, sight unseen. So I was like, hey, shot him a DM, like, hey, everyone referred to you as like, hey, I'm songwriter moving to town. Would love to come bend your ear, buy a cup of coffee, just kind of get a pulse on what's going on. And he was like, yeah, man, just stop by anytime. And so sure enough, like I roll into town on, you know, like midnight, 1 o'clock, woke up the next day, had to go get simple things like, you know, because the house didn't have any, you know, toilet paper or nothing like that. I had to go run and get some essentials. But then I went right to his shop and I was like, you know, hey, is Zach here? And they're like, yeah, he's just in the back. Went and named a face, handshake, and just start that ball rolling. And as luck would have it, you know, I think, you know, a lot of it's just God's timing of just like, hey, it's actually kind of works out pretty good because he had actually gone ahead and listened to some of my stuff ahead of time. So at least had an idea that, okay, he's got some stuff. He sounds like he can play and sing and stuff. He was in the middle of organizing a writer's round, we call it. I don't know if you guys call them guitar pools or something like that, where it's like, it's an original music thing where it's like you'll basically have anywhere from 2 to 4 different artists on stage at one time, just an acoustic or whatever. You just kind of round robin original songs. Like you'll sing one, I'll sing one, and then we loop back and start it again, go for like an hour or so. And then you clear the stage and get 3 or 4 more up there. And so it's just it's a big Nashville thing. And like in Texas, they do very similar too, where it's very common for these songwriting central places. But he was organizing one, just one of the local breweries. And he was like, you interested in playing? I'm like, yep. So I think that was within the first 2 weeks of landing there, was in my first little writers round out there. Met just about everyone in that, because my town I'm in's got a pretty cool little music scene of great folks, and we all hit it off and just met a lot of those guys that night. And then met some other folks there that like own different venues and stuff, you know, and just got in good with them and just started getting in rotations, just making relationships, and that kind of kicked things off. And then, you know, it kind of branches out to where I kind of try to hit the ground running with just, I'd play wherever if they're willing to have me on the stage. Especially it's hard right now unless you can kind of have someone vouching for you. It's like most places, they just turn to like your social media and go, hey, what's your Instagram follower count? What's your Spotify monthly listeners or your TikTok and things like that. And it's less on actually how you sound. It's more like what social media clout do you have?
Yeah. What are you going to bring in?
Because, and I honestly, I don't fault them either, because they get so inundated with requests like that. It's almost like just an easy, just litmus test of like, is this person legit or not? Because clearly if they've got, you know, 500 followers versus 50,000 followers and they're a music thing. It's like, okay, you're going to probably choose the 50,000 just because they're still a business and they've got to run. And
But you could be a great musician and a horrible marketer on social media. So like, I understand that point of view.
But the difference with them though is that they don't want to be, they're not something they don't want to be. They financially also aren't that in that position to develop you. They're like, hey, come to us. We're more than happy to have you, but we can't do, you've still got steps you got to do because it's so geared towards that social, which I hate personally, obviously, because I'm not a social media guy, but I understand it. It's like, it's like, would you go to so you do a lot of interdiction stuff. Would you go to an interdiction class with someone that has only had one traffic stop in his career?
Right. No,
you're not going to go listen to that guy. And he's definitely not going to have you teach or put you on or have you put in. So it's that mindset of like, hey dude, I'm glad you're here. I've still got to sell X amount at night. And if you can't even bring a single warm body because no one knows who you are, I can't make that calculated choice to bring you in yet. It's nothing personal. It's just business.
No, yeah, I get it. I see that perspective. I was thinking.
So I try to hit the ground running as much as I could right away and just still chugging along. Now I'm trying to in the mindset where I'm trying to get out of town a lot because you can just, you're in front of different faces and fans and stuff like that. You can kind of just get in different markets. And honestly, Nashville's so saturated, it's like, I still got to pay my bills where it's like a lot of places like in Nashville, unless you're on like a show where it's like a ticketed thing or you're selling merch and stuff like that, it doesn't pay a whole lot. It's like, you're kind of at the mercy of just tips and that's not guaranteed. And I was like, shoot, I still got a family to feed. It's like, and so that's why, a buddy hit me up. He's got a small welding business and he's like, hey, I need a second set of hands for doing some of this stuff. You interested? I'm like, yep. So been learning welding and helping him with a bunch of projects and just trying to figure it out. Just kind of hit the ground running of just, hey, I've got my priorities of being a father and provider and husband. It's like, I can't just put my foot in the sand. Like, no, I'm just a singer. I'm a musician. It's like, that's the only thing, I'm a man that needs to provide and make sure the bills are paid. And yeah, hopefully down the road, it's just by music, but I also understand that that's not like how it happens.
Is there any apprehension in that industry of you being a cop, or is it? I guess country music kind of
trying to be a cop at the same time.
No, if they know your backstory.
No, because I think it for the most part it's pretty receptive. Because I can't really hide it. Like half of my original songs are all geared towards that. So it's like you got to be pretty. I'm not gonna disparage anybody. It's pretty easy to pick up on the fact that I have some background in that. But that's okay. But I rarely get, any kind of hate or comments. Other than like, comment threads and stuff like that for every now and again. But it's kind of like when you're on the job, you can't, if someone's, MFing you, it's like, he's not mad at me. He's mad at what I represent. So I can't take that to my core and own that and and let him or her impact that, part of my emotion because it's not true. It's like, cause they don't know me from Adam. So why am I letting him have this power and influence over me? So it's no different. I think that helps with when I'm playing music. It's like, yeah, you may boo me. You may not show up. You may say my song sucks. I'm like, okay, that's all right. It's like, it still means something to me and hopefully means something to someone else. Clearly not you, but bless your heart, as they say.
And I'm sure you find that, those few trolls that come in there and just throw those jabs. And I think in our first podcast with Tom Rizzo, we talked about that, like that, when you get that negative comment and you just dwell on that one, like it's so, you've hundreds of whatever great ones saying, hey, great song, you did good, put on a good show. And then you get that one. Maybe it's something about you being a former cop or whatever, but it's just that one like just bugs you. Like, did you just skip over those, or have you dwelled on it? Like, how have you found your way to just be like, forget the negative stuff and let's look at the positive?
Well, I think being a cop helped exclusive that because I think what it did is allowed me to have empathy for that person because I think I relate it to. It's no different than you look at most people that commit crime. It's it's the old adage, hurt people. And it's like, and it's not always in a criminal matter, but like, I look at it as like, I feel sorry for that person because, clearly whatever I'm representing, whether it's police or just maybe it's a song about, like I got a song coming out on Friday and it's about line of duty death. And it's like, and it's a heavy song in like, they may be like, I can't be so surface to be like, oh, I hate your song. I hate it. It's like, because maybe they lost someone and that's still such an healed wound that they're dealing with, that their only outlet to even have that is this, they turn right to anger or to cast stones. And I can't help it. I think and I have an empathy for that person. And again, it's kind of like when someone, tells you off when you're wearing the uniform. It's like, I can't own that because I've just got to believe, even for my own mental health and stuff, is like that it's not about me. There's something else going on that I don't know about. And I'm going to just, I'm going to let that go and I'm going to pray for that person and not try to turn to holding something against them. Now, if someone goes further and tries to throw hands or do something like that, it's like, okay, well, it's different. I'll have empathy later. But from just the verbal stuff or just people when they say nasty stuff, it's like, I feel sorry that you're at that place where you feel like that is a needed thing to come cast stones, especially when it's the time or the topic of like, if it's a serious song, it's like, clearly I'm being the vulnerable one, putting something out there that's vulnerable and important to me, to where you just totally discard that and you got to just jump right to where your injury is. And I'm not going to fault you for that, because a lot of people are in those state of minds to no fault of their own and don't have the tools or the resources necessarily to get through that. And hopefully they can at some point, whether it's counseling or therapy or just the right people in their life that can start bringing positivity. So no, I can't. I've got to make the decision to not stoke that fire by burning myself in the process. So I try to just let that go and just pray for those souls as much as I can.
When you were on the job, what kind of hobbies did you have? Was it music that kept you busy, or
music kept me busy? I think towards the end there, like, I think a part of, like, I'm sure most people, is like your interest in hobbies really start extenuating towards just the fun parts of the job. And you just, next thing you know, you're doing the job in some facet more and more and more, whether it's getting on different units or different specialties and stuff that just on top of your normal duties. But I always loved, besides that, like, we lived even though we were in that sale area, we lived, we lived about an hour away. We had 10 acres, beautiful woods, we backed up to the mountains. And so I loved hunting and fishing, and my wife's family is big with boating and stuff. And so they always had a boat for the most part. So we'd go out and go crabbing and, just jump in the river and so I loved outdoorsy stuff. And then, we'd go jump on the quads and go up in the hills and just rip around and, try to get a deer during deer season and go pull out some salmon during salmon season. And, that was kind of the way of it. And then really besides that, it was just being dad. Cause that just, especially with little kids, it was just, it occupies so much of your time, especially when they're young like that. So yeah, I was copping it up, trying to do a few of these little things outside, playing with the kids, and then moonlighting as a aspiring country music cover band. But that kind of occupied most of my time.
What was your favorite or best assignment while you're on the job?
I love SWAT.
Yeah.
That was
Was it a full-time, part-time?
No, we were a part-time team. We were a regional team. So we actually were made up of 10 cities in our local area. So we were, depending on the year, whether we were the largest or second largest team in the state. But it was great. Like, great dudes. We had really good support from the staff, from the command staff. And, we stayed busy, especially once COVID was rolling around, because it's just, Seattle was one of those cities that was just under siege for weeks on end. And so whether our team was there helping out or we'd also have a lot of times where things like Seattle would be so hands-on with, like, literally every SPD officer was on detail for the riots. Well, we would then send cars to go just handle the priority calls just in Seattle. So like there'd be times, like, literally it would be like, we'd send like a couple of cars, or the other neighbors, we'd do mutual aid. And like, so there'd be like 6 to 8 squad cars. We'd double them up, and we were taking all the priority calls in Seattle just as, 8 of us. And it was just, you're literally just going town to town to town. It was just mayhem. And
crazy.
So, but
wow.
So yeah, so that was a busy season, but yeah, I loved SWAT. I loved being on the firearms cadre. I was really pursuing K9 for a long time. It's just one of those jobs where once they come up, it's like, you better get after it. And so unfortunately, when it came up for me, just got beat out by another really good buddy of mine. And he's been a great handler. So I'm not going to fault him for that, obviously, but And that just was my window because that obviously was the only spot for the next several years. And that's all right. But I still honestly was very satisfied with, because my aspirations were just SWAT and canine. And if I only got at least one of those, I was still having a great time.
Guess what?
And so that was definitely, I think, my funnest or most fun assignment was that.
We have a regional team around here. I did it for 5 years before I got my dog.
Heck yeah.
There's no way I could have done both, but I love the group of guys and the command staff. Like you're working with, on departments, there's guys that have different mindsets, different mentalities.
Yeah.
On the SWAT team, you pretty much all have like the same mentality and mindset. So it's a group of guys that all have same goals, aspirations, and all that. So even the regional team, you're bringing it together, I don't know, 5 guys from each department or something.
Yep.
Just give a number. And most of those guys all have the same thing and same mindset. So it was cool to be around guys, very like-minded individuals, even during training and even call outs or whatever. It was a good time. It just being on that, having a dog and the other assignments that I had, there's no way I could have done it.
It's fun how such a small world it is. Like that's how I end up linking up with, well, you guys too, because Brent, he came out with another one of his buddies, Tate, and they came out for one of our SWAT weeks, like back in, I want to say it was 2019. We were off doing our, because annually we could go away for a week as a team and just do nothing but just, revamping and just getting immersion, just doing tactics and training and stuff. And every other year we would try to bring in outside instructors, so you're not constantly just being the big fish in your own pond thing. And so they actually came out for like 4 days and just helped put us through a bunch of stuff. And so that was my first meeting of him. And then you fast forward now, it's like, oh, it's kind of a fun full circle thing of linking up with these guys in a totally different, framework. So it's just a small world. I think it's pretty awesome.
I feel like those guys are kind of bringing together a lot of cops that are like-minded too.
Yeah.
I've introduced them to some, they've introduced me to some, but it's all like all the cops that I've met through them are like just cool, level-headed guys, very like-mindseted individuals. So it's cool to see. It's cool to watch it happen, especially from like you're from the Northwest, we're from Midwest, they're from down south. Like it's all over, but we all have very similar mentalities and mindsets.
100%.
Cool. We got a few minutes left. So if you want to dive into the conversation about kind of what led you to leave law enforcement a little earlier than you expected, we're all ears. Or if we can continue conversations about country music. I'm good either way.
I'm good with either. So I mean, I can talk about that. That's not a problem for me. I mean, I've spent time working through that. So I think it's better and better.
Yeah, I don't want you to relive the worst day of your life, basically. But I think that if you're willing to talk about it, the cops that do listen, I think that there might be someone that is going through a similar situation that would benefit from hearing it. So, but it's completely your call. I'm not.
I can run through it. And please, if I feel like I'm rambling, just start reeling me back in, because I can tend to lose space on that. But so it was back in summer of 19. We were actually on a different SWAT detail for our neighboring city. We were just stood up there's 4 of us stood up as like more of a QRF, they had a big event going on, and we were just going to be stood up just to be on the ground in case something kicked off, to just be like kind of a direct response instead of having to like wait around for like other assets coming in.
Right.
And so we were just, best case, we were just going to be there and just never, we were split up into 2 different vehicles and just going to be sitting there and bored as hell for 8 hours. But what kicked it off was I went to move my patrol car, and our radio was still on in my patrol car. We were on a different tack channel for my portable, but when I turned my car on, I'm sure yours are all the similar, where it's like, kick it on, the radio kicks on, and all of a sudden all I hear is the tones going off, and it's set to my city, which was just a couple miles away. And what got my attention was the first thing that came over the radio was, hey, all units, I'm paraphrasing, stand by. Sounds like he might be willing to trade the kid for some cigarettes, or the baby for some cigarettes. And so I was like, got my attention cued in, and long story short, it basically turned out to be, there was a transient camp in our city, where a couple transients were staying, and just like a big kind of group tent thing out in the woods. For this day, I still don't know how it ended up being that way, but there was the suspect, his girlfriend, and then their child together, which is 18 months old, they were all staying out there in the woods. And he was basically going through, major let's just say his tox report wasn't the prettiest after the fact, but he was going through a lot of withdrawals and highs and lows based on what he had taken. and he had basically been tuning up his girlfriend and the baby all night, to where with another transient there, long story short, she was able to get out to go try to score him dope. But really she went off and called 911 and got the wheels rolling for that to get, the cops out there. Ended up being a bit of a standoff with him, with just him and the child. I called in an alert because I was alert to it, and we ended up getting redirected to go help out with that. And as things progressed, negotiations were not going great. And ultimately during the process, he starts basically strangling the kid, like in the crook of his arm like that. And I went through my use of force, checks and balances of just everything with, what was available at the time. And based on the totality of I felt I was justified with deadly force. And so, while he was strangling the kid, I ended up shooting him in the forehead, and dropped the kid. Obviously, it didn't need any more follow-up. And that ended up becoming a big pivot point for me in my career, in my life. Like, I still didn't have any issue with what I did or anything like that, or like why I did it. And I actually just had to go back in August, cause where we were at, we have a whole separate inquest process in the county I was in for, well, anytime it's mostly shootings, but it's really anytime death is involved and it's at the hands or in its relation to law enforcement. So I didn't have to go back in August and testify on that. But finally, it was all clear and everything was good to go.
Good.
But a big problem for me was, and that developed over time, was that because at the time my son was the same approximate age and size. Mm-hmm. And so I would have these, basically this like 20-second reel, like loop in my head, like 100 times a day I would relive the same moment. I'd go in like I did, except he's holding my son. I go to take my shot, but I don't account for my offset and I shoot my kid in the head, and it would just destroy me every time that I would loop through that thing. And it became a spiraling problem to where cause I was back on the job and like I was still trying to keep my bearings on things, but things would continually progress where those reactions would get worse and worse as I would go, to where essentially anytime, because in my mind, Murphy was telling me, he's like, hey, you got freaking lucky on that first one. You're going to get in it again, but you're going to screw it up and you're going to go to prison. And so obviously it's like, logically it's like, that's not true. And that's not making sense. But
right.
That's the devil. Yeah. The devil's the king of deception. That was still imprinted hard on my heart, that basically every time calls and stuff that came out that were anywhere related to that situation, I would just literally have these essentially these panic attacks in the patrol car while I'm driving to the scene to go deal with this next thing. So rather than trying to, and obviously it's not what you want to be doing for police work, because you need to be focusing on what's at hand, like this problem, not carrying the burden on the back from something else. But it just was where I was at. So I'd be spending that whole time processing through, calming myself down from my own bullshit to go, okay, hey, what's the meat and potatoes of this call now? Because I'm pulling up and I go, try to get my shit figured out. And so that was becoming a huge problem. The wheels are kind of starting to fall off. But I kept fighting through it. I kept like, no, I'm going to be fine. We'll get through this. And then all of a sudden, COVID happened. Things are getting just even more stupid. So it's like, now we're just adding more and more on top of like, hey, we're getting called out way more often. We're getting more intense things with the riots and protesters. And it's just, there's no downtime. The big thing for me was like, I started breaking down physically now. It's like I was fighting it like emotionally, but now things like, hey, my blood pressure's through the roof, like I'm getting like internal stuff that's not working right anymore. Right. Things like libido is gone, like all these things that like, I'm like on paper, I'm like, hey, I'm not working right. So you go to the doc. Hey, I feel like shit. What do I take my blood? Do what I need to figure out how I can figure this out. And they come back and like, everything's looking fine other than your blood pressure is crazy high and your cortisol levels are super high. So it's like, which is just like the stress hormone that's we're acting. And so you're constantly, and come to find out, like after my therapy stuff was like, because every time you're reliving that moment, your mind is telling your body you're in that moment again. So you're getting those same chemical dumps as you were. So so it's almost like you're just getting this loop of just adrenaline, cortisol all day, just wearing yourself out. So long story short, like, I ended up my brother-in-law, he actually was kind of one of the first ones that kind of really cued in on it, because he went through a similar one and he ended up going to a place in Utah to go work through that. So, hey, shout out Deer Hollow. That's amazing people down there, that organization, but they're a pretty immersive therapy facility, specifically almost exclusively for military or law enforcement. Now, it's not that you get a few that are kind of out of that spectrum, but that's kind of who they gear for. And I'm going down there for a good stretch of time voluntarily. It was like when I started it, like the only people that even knew was like I had to let my direct supervisor know, and for just obviously logistics reasons, and then took off and got a date to go down there and did that. And really, once I left for there, it's like I never touched the road again. It just ended up being a part of that process of just, it started downwards. It made sense for it would be my time. And as it worked out, like I basically ended up partially, it's considered a partial medical retirement based on it. So that was the last time I ever ran a call, was Christmas Eve of 2020.
Was that your first officer involved shooting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it takes a lot of courage to take that shot. So I commend you for that. That's pretty impressive. So I think you did everything. And I wasn't even there, but just based on what you're telling me, you did everything the right way. And I'm sure that kid thanks you every day. So if you have any apprehension or any of that, like I know me saying it does nothing, but you did the right thing for the right reasons, man.
Well, and it's funny. It's like, even that's a part that still eats him up too, is like down the road. It's like, cause you don't know obviously his situation, or because obviously, I hope for the best that like the mom's turned around and stuff, but like, you don't know what they're going to get fixed. Cause obviously there's a part of him too there where it's like, I would imagine as a mother, it'd almost be like, you don't want him to grow up and thinking that, hey, your dad was trying to kill you, versus like, it'd probably be better that they paint me as the bad guy. But at the same time, you also don't want him to also look harshly upon law enforcement going forward. So it's this balance of
cops killed my dad, and now I'm going to be negative.
Which cop killed my dad versus my dad was trying to kill me. It's like, it's right. Like what's gonna cause mitigate the impact of this kid to hopefully not be derailed in his journey, and then become, like in that hurt people kind of thing, where it's like, so trying to mitigate that is just like, I hope he's doing good, and just it sounds like, I'm obviously not in the loop of how he's at, but just I've heard through the grapevine from like the different attorneys and stuff that are involved that he's doing well and healthy. So that's good. That's a blessing.
Cool.
But yeah, so that ended up being the big crux for, there was other calls and stuff like that kind of added up, but that was kind of a big defining point for like, just cause that's really where the wheels are falling off. And just, I had to let go of cause so much of my identity at the time was police work. And I think that was also, I'm sure that's a lot of stuff that you guys are trying to hit at, is having to where your identity is not totally consumed with the job and having balance beyond that. And I think it wasn't until I removed myself from that to where that was one of the biggest struggles, is like, I convinced myself, like, no, I'm a failure if I don't do 30 years in this job. This is what God put me on this earth to do. And if I don't fulfill that, I'm a failure. And it took me a long time to work through that and get around that. And now it's, it's like, I can see a much clearer balance of why balance. It's still obviously a hugely needed profession, but you can't look at it from like, hey, whether you do 5 years or 50 years, it's like, you still stood up and did the job and like filled the gap. And if it's time for you to get out, dude.
We talked about that last podcast, was about just you did your service, this 5, 10, 15 years. You don't have to do a full 30 years or 20 years. As long as you do it for the right reasons. And
you
did it, you were here, you did your part. Because nobody ever questions, people in the military. I did, 9 years, but if I did my original 3 years or 4 years, nobody questions that you left after that first part, because you did your part and you left. And yet there's some people that do 30 or 40 years because of their choice, but they're all put in that category as, hey, you serve your country. Well, police officers probably be the same as you served your community, whether it was 5 years, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, you still did your part. You don't walk away. You're not a failure because you didn't make it to retirement or to maxing out your pension, because you know what? You went through some hellacious things culminating with what you just told us about. And at some point, you just can't do that no more, you know, and to leave the profession and just move on and do something else is commendable, because really, we're not made to do that. We're not made to go through these, I forget the statistics. It talks about like these
traumatic
incidents is everybody goes through 2 or 3 in a lifetime, and police officers do 1,000 in their career, you know, and it's like, we're not meant to be that way. So
or you shouldn't be surprised at the damage that follows.
The damage, the way that you are, you know, what happens to you afterwards, you know, like they'll talk, oh, look at him, he's drinking or he's doing this or whatever. Well, there's a lot of shit happens to us, you 100%. Know? So when you walk away and you do your time, it should be, thank you for your service. That's it. Like, you served, you're on to your next best thing. And I wish more people would look at that, because I think a lot of people stay in this career longer than they probably should, because they're worried about that pension or that stigma of, hey, I want to be a retired cop, not just a former cop.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
I think we do some of that to ourselves though too, because we don't offer a lot of times, even if we were to offer like a 5-year pension and you get like a quarter of your full pension, or you know what I'm saying? Like if you were to max out at 20 years, something like that, we don't offer a lot of that. It's like, in our state, if you don't do 20 years, you don't get anything. Nothing. Yeah. Like, you know, some like, and even to carry, like as a retired cop, to carry off duty, the Fed law or whatever it is, you have to do 10 years and be retired or something like that. Was it?
Like Leosa stuff?
Yeah. So you have to do at least 10 years and leave in good standing, or leave as a retired cop or something like that. So like, even then they're still saying you have to do 10 years.
There's a hard number. They're putting those
hard numbers. I'm like, I just feel like if you're to say, all right, you can look at a matrix, even say 5 years you get this, 10 years you get this, 15 years, or you know, even make a matrix.
Well, because what you're doing is you're asking someone to go do some extra work and trying to figure that out.
Exactly.
Like it's government. They're not.
They're not going to.
They're not going to try to make waves unless they're forced to do it. Like, and unfortunately, that's the way of it.
No, that you're right. You talked a little bit about going away for 30 days or whatever. And early in my career, I had an incident where someone had passed away from an accident or whatever, and it really bothered me. Nothing to the severity of that, but
hey, trauma's trauma, man. That's the big thing I learned was, so don't downplay it, because we started.
I agree, but yours is way more in my mind. It would be way more traumatic than mine is. But I had tried to reach out to some people and ask for help, and it kind of got shut down. It was early in my career, and I don't think that early in our careers, trying to talk about your feelings as a male, first off, and then as a cop, number two, it's like, that was unheard of. Right. But I have a good buddy that was a psychologist, and I sat down with him a couple of times, and he theoretically can't like see me on a medical term, but I was like, listen, dude, just let me talk to you, let me vent. And if you think that I need to see someone, just be like, hey, you should probably go talk to someone else.
Sure.
And you don't necessarily need to go, this is to everyone. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to go see a therapist or a psychologist to talk to him. But if you have someone that you are going through some things, and to get it out of your brain and go have a conversation with someone that you trust, and they have that same type of dialogue that me and my buddy had, like, yeah, I think you need to go talk to someone else. I think that's huge. I think that us keeping it in our mind is brutal to ourselves. Once we start to talk about it and get it out of our mouths, I feel like it kind of relieves some of that stress, or it did for me anyways.
Yeah, well, like they say, I mean, sunlight's sometimes the best disinfectant in a lot of ways. So that even if it's like you're not trying to forget anything, but sometimes if you just have the ability to unload that a little bit, it makes the return impact less. And like I said, it doesn't have to be like an official therapy thing, but like just the ability to have someone that's not going to hold it against you or look down on it and just go, hey man, you saw some shit. And it's like, that's not, like you said, like outside of the scope of what normal people are going to go to. It's like, it's okay to not be okay, and just to let that out every now and again. I think that's the more that's normalized, I think is going to be better for everybody.
Good. So we finish up each podcast. We were doing 3 questions. I'm not a huge fan of it anymore, so Mike doesn't know, but I changed it last time. So we're just going to end with 1. Both of us teach for Justice Academy.
Yeah.
So what is your definition of justice?
I think, well, I'm going to try to stay away from like the typical like law enforcement. I think as more of the totality, but I think justice for me is you're treated fairly, but you're going to get what you have earned or deserved. I think that's both positive and negative, where if you put in work, it's, you should, in most cases, you should be able to reap what you sow. And then if you do wrong, you should also reap what you sow, is based on the totality of whatever morals or laws or standards that you live by, or whether it's by the Constitution, local laws, or just God himself, you're held to that standard. And if you violate that standard, I think justice is that you are going to reap what that would require. But fairly and across the board with everybody is that everyone's got the same rules to play by. And if you don't be surprised, but, and to hopefully have that moral compass to try to live the best version you can, but there are repercussions if you deviate.
It's very similar to pretty much everyone else. It's kind of all encompassing that. It's kind of what they're saying is just like society's, I guess, norms. So you conform to that, and you go outside of that. You as the individual that went outside of that should be prepared for what society's going to lay down on you, I guess.
And if you don't like it, there's ways to change it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it, or get the law changed, or whatever the manner, or, but yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining us on Beyond the Barrel, man. It was eye-opening. It was amazing, and I can't wait to see you perform tonight. Yeah. I'm pumped.
Can't wait for tonight,
time.
Michael.
Yeah.
So
be good.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. This is great.
Coming.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all.